Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to learn more about what we do here, head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, that's where we spend time answering your questions on media and virtual events. And then our second hour is something that we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be talking about LinkedIn marketing and the power of LinkedIn, using it for your brand and for your business. And we invite you, producers, to go ahead. This is the perfect time to submit questions so that we can answer them during the first hour. And let's get into the show, Bill.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liberty. Our first question this morning comes from Andy Carlucci, our old friend in San Francisco, California. He says, any thoughts on the new DeckLinks from Blackmagic Design?
Guy?
Yeah, I have the older model here, the 4K Extreme, and these ones are fascinating for what they do for the value. I mean, it's crazy to think that for, what is it now, $129, I believe? $125 that you can get HD out. So the difference between the former models, it'll do 4K. And keep in mind that these are ingest on the record, and then the other one's called monitor. So that would be your output. So if you're like in Resolve, you can view your footage on a nice monitor in real time. So I think they're an awesome value. So jump on the site and take a look at the various models, but keep in mind that they are in or out, and then the other bigger ones will do both. And you get the breakout cable, which will do XLR and AES EBU.
Wonderful. Alex?
And they support 4K 120 frames per second. Just saying.
That part.
It's new. It's new to the cards. And so, the value is pretty amazing for these cards. And the new ones look good. They just turned up a couple notches. So, it's one of those things, like, you don't feel bad if the other ones that you owned are still working, but the new ones are going to add a little bit more feature set that you may want. They're still not supporting Dolby Vision, which means that they're not able to add or read metadata on a frame-by-frame basis. It's still constant, which is what HDR10 is.
And Mitchell?
I'm fascinated with the MV-E2. I think it's the small mini add-on card that they have. How do you get stuff on and off it, and what would be the use case with an Apple product?
All right, next question.
Next one comes from Alton Christensen in New York City, and Alton says, best way to get a still functioning Firewire 400 DV camera into a Mac M1 for digitizing.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, first you'll need one of these, which is the USB-C to Thunderbolt, and then you go Thunderbolt to Firewire 800, and then from there you can go Firewire 800 to 400. So it's like 3 adapters. Or you could do it the way that I do it, which is... So if you're just doing a little bit and capturing just a little bit of footage, that route's fine in multiple adapters. You are going to be in the DV color space and the DV codec, which isn't pretty. If you can get on eBay, which is where I searched for a Sony HD, it's a 1500A deck, which has SDI out, and now you can kick it out into one of those cards that we just talked about, and then you can go into ProRes, and that'll be a much better editing experience. So if you're doing a lot of it, you'll have timecode as well. That's the way I'd go.
Okay, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I have a roundabout way of doing that. I got into my old Power Mac through the AGA Kona card, and then I get that out into my M1 via the ATEMs. So it kind of works.
And Bill?
I've done what a guy suggests and done the dongle thing, and it actually works really well. DV was a 3.5 megabit per second digital codec, and the stream is not particularly big. One thing that I made a mistake of is I was trying to save it onto some big format like ProRes 444 or something like that. That turned out to be pretty useless. And as a matter of fact, I had a long conversation with an old friend of mine, Adam Wilt, who's very technical engineering type, and he told me after doing some tests that literally H.264 as a target format was fine for capturing all the technical data. Now, you may not want to go to something like that if you're doing it for editing rather than pure storage. But if you're just trying to back up these onto a digital format that's going to last on a computer hard drive, that's perfectly reasonable.
And Courtney.
I don't know if it works, but if you have a USB-A type dongle or a dock on your M1, they have these cables that are USB A type to Firewire 400, designed to plug into that DCR TRV 75E DV camera, which was a Sony camera. So maybe that will work. And they're only about $8, so hey, what do you have to lose? A lot less than going through Firewire and into Thunderbolt and back into USB. It's a lot more direct.
Next question.
Bob Smith in Stanford, California says, I've got some non-techie colleagues who have decided to do a hybrid workshop tomorrow. They reached out for support on Friday and we can't help them. What array of components might yield the best results for non-adepts doing a hybrid workshop?
Go ahead, Alex.
Really, it's really hard to do in a short period of time. The problem really is that people won't know how to handle some of the things that they have. What someone with experience brings also is the ability to troubleshoot, because rarely is the field turnout. They say the map is not the territory, and this is a very good example of that. I mean, some of the basic things that the hard part right now is that that they've got a day to figure out. So what I'm kind of thinking is, inside of what they have, what can they do? Because they really can't do a lot. I will tell you that if someone came to me, I would tell them to go all virtual. I would just say, just don't, like, everybody come in over Zoom. Don't try to do this, without any timing, without any time. I mean, you can have a laptop with a webcam. I mean, a C920 or a Brio might help. A mic that they can hand around with some kind of digitization, something that has a digital, a USB out. But they're like a day of warning into a hybrid is, will not be great. Like I can just tell you right now, it's not going to be like, it's going to be a rough. And this is how people go back to wanting to go back to all in-person events. Is they come up with these things. They come up with an idea to do a hybrid at the last minute, and then it's really bad. And then they're like, why do we do this? Let's make sure everybody comes in. But really, the answer is to go the other direction. It's actually easier to get everybody to come in over Zoom than it is to try to put a mic and a camera into a room with, let's say, 6 to 8 people, or even 3 to 4 people, and then have that actually not sound really roomy and look weird, and all those other things. With a day of warning, it's a pretty dark future for that show. Go ahead, Jesse.
And nowadays hybrid also means different things to different folks. So when they say it, they might actually mean just a simple one-way broadcast out of the room. It gets really complicated when you're doing some Q&A, or you're trying to bring the return Zoom feed into the room, for example. So then you have to really be careful with audio. Some of the basic components, if you want to recommend some things, I would definitely recommend a bunch of these USB to Ethernet adapters. You want to get all your Zoom computers on a wired connection to your internet if possible, and also use headset mics or microphones that are very close to someone's face, and sort of try to separate, if you're using live sound in the room, really try to separate that live sound reinforcement and what's going into the panelist's microphone. And then you want to try to source the largest monitor you can if those panelists want to see the folks on Zoom as a easy visual reference, and try to get that monitor as close to the camera as you can, so you have an eye line that matches, so the panelists can sort of see the people in the room. They can be looking at the camera, and they can also reference the folks on Zoom, so it feels like a unified experience, for the viewers.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, and to build on what Jesse said, if you what you don't want to do is use a lot of outbound, anything that would require any kind of audio delay. If you're going to interact, if you don't have the tools to actually manage this well, you want to be able to lean on the echo cancellation that's built into the system. If you delay the audio at all, it no longer matches, and it will echo freely into the room. So be very careful of anything that might add audio delay, because it'll defeat the echo cancellation, and then things get really uncomfortable, for everybody involved. And so, we have definitely done these with laptops and put, Brios on top of, or even C920s on top of monitors. And that can work to some degree. But what I would recommend is that they spend all day today having people online, jumping on and talking to them. They should definitely consider this as a pretty risky thing to do. And they should, carve out the afternoon at least to figure out what's working and not working in the process.
And Jason?
Yeah, and along those lines, if I had to choose based on the time frame that I had, 24 hours, I would get everybody on headsets, because as Zoom's audio processing improves, I don't think you have time for microphones. Yeah, they're more important, but if you can remove the component of, anybody having a shot at echoing back because they're on a live speaker, that's going to improve quite a bit.
Next question.
Guy Cochran's up next from Seattle, Washington, and here on the panel, how would you live stream to Instagram?
Alex?
After years, 3, 4, 5 years, ever since Instagram started live streaming, we're like, why can't we have an RTMP input? Why can't we stream to an ingest point? So I guess on July 8th is when the blog post, I guess it just got to us here, but on Friday, Instagram has announced that you can now stream to Instagram. There's an Instagram studio. I only read the blog post. I haven't tried to do it yet. But it looks like you're able to now set up a endpoint and stream Instagram. It's 720, so it's 720 by 1280. It looks like the quality that you can now send to Instagram is a 9 by 16, and so there you go. They're now the next thing is that. Here's my next prediction is there won't be any trim. So you still can't trim the beginning of it. So you can't have a professional start because there won't be any trim that's available to you. And that will take another year, because it seems to take every live, even though Instagram, this feature was probably added by somebody at Facebook or Meta, and it's still going to be, in my opinion, it's still probably going to be another year before we see trim, which is like the most important feature to add to your live streaming. And instead we'll get emojis that sit over in little hats and little sparklers. This is how it's for the last 10 years. This has been the pattern. Instead of having those get actual tools that are actually useful, we get little baubles that are not useful. Anyway, so I'm glad that Instagram did it. I think a lot of us have. We'll see if people come back. I mean, a lot of people who were doing live streaming, other than stars and kind of average people, I think that a lot of people kind of wrote off Instagram as this platform and built other pipelines around it. But we'll see if it, it's big enough that it could still work.
Yeah, there'll still be some work, because anyone who did attempt to do a live production was trying to use Yellow Duck, which was against terms of service. And the people who are going live are, your influencers, your coaches, your educators, and they're quite comfortable with just using their mobile device. So we shall see how many companies and or brands try to take it to that next level. To your point, it's been some time. 2017 is when Instagram Live launched. So,
yeah.
Jason?
Are they going to be streaming? Does anyone know if they're going to be streaming to begin with at 1:1 at that nice little square aspect ratio?
I think that the guidance is 1920 or 720 by 1280.
Thank heaven.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He says, IMAX mentioned that gameplay demos are part of the Summer Game Fest event, stream live to their theaters. Wouldn't you need an FS-HDR similar box for processing the output from a gaming PC/console to cinema standards?
Jason?
Okay, just because they're being streamed live doesn't mean that they are actually occurring live and then, being encoded and then broadcast live. So, yeah, I can absolutely see my way around like possibly 3 different ways that they could be used. Doesn't mean it's being used. And I'd say the big linchpin is whether or not it's actually happening and being broadcast live, in which case, yeah, almost certainly.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if that was the one that happened a little while ago, I'm pretty sure that was at least partially live. And a lot of times when you see those big productions, it wouldn't be unusual to have an FS-HDR or an FS something or some kind of frame converter involved. Usually these kinds of streams, may have, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of equipment, and that's just one little box that it has to run through to make sure that it's legal for whatever it's going to. So it wouldn't be unusual for it to be there, but it's not a big deal. You're not talking about someone just playing something out into an encoder or with OBS. You're talking about potentially broadcast trucks or studio facilities that might have stacks of frame converters.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's right back again with, I've seen BTS behind-the-scenes videos and streams from major shows which have multiview output along with comms and or program audio. What hardware would you need to stream the multiview output? Would it be a web presenter, for example?
Mitchell?
Yeah, you could certainly use that. If you're using an ATEM Mini Extreme, both program outputs allow you to select the MV or the multi-view output, but you can't stream that to USB into your computer. So you need some intervening device to be able to do that. In the case of what we do for Office Hours 2.0, I guess you could use ZoomISO to build your own multi-view output if you wanted to. It's all pretty much the same.
And Alex?
Yeah, and a lot of these use even just little hardware boxes that are a couple $100 that will do WebRTC. Like they're just built for this thing, and you have video in, and it'll push those multi-views out and make it available to a handful of people that can watch it. So it's a pretty this has become very, very common for a lot of broadcast trucks to be able to do this because a lot of their operators are off-site now. Like literally, even for big games, they'll have the EVS. Sometimes the EVS operators won't be there, and or other graphics, is getting in. And now the world is pushing every year. We're going to see more and more of what used to be the on-site crew going off-site because they figured it out partially during COVID, and now they're they're going, oh, this is really great. so let's keep moving.
And Guy?
Yeah, I'd love to see it in 4K. For our output here, specifically, we're using the Constellation, and we had some of the older web presenters which were outputting in 720. So the multi-view wasn't a really beautiful experience. It was pretty, well, it still is today. It's kind of not smooth looking. And so I sent down an AJA, was it a UTAP, which is a 1080 device, but then we found out quickly that the Constellation outputs 4K and the AJA UTAP would not accept that. So we're yanking that out and we're putting down a 4K web presenter. So if you're using a Constellation, be aware that that's a 4K multi-view.
Yeah, JJ McKenna also says they're reinforcing the 4K device needing that. Next question.
Next one comes from Todd Perry up in the Coconino Forest near Prescott, Arizona. When recording a meeting using ZoomISO and ATEM ISO, would you suggest running a second instance of Zoom to be on if you need to interact with the meeting?
Go ahead, Jesse.
I would say it's less about interacting with the meeting because you probably could, you can, pull those ISO feeds and then also use Zoom in a normal way on a single machine. But it's sort of about isolating those particular tasks. The whole point of a backup recording is to sort of separate it and put it in a place where it's just doing that backup. And when you start using ZoomISO and things like that, you start to saturate the NIC, which is the network connection on the computer and the CPU. So if you can put that on a dedicated machine that's just doing ZoomISO, you'll probably be in a safer place because if you have a Zoom operator, machine where you're doing other things like slides or you're pulling up a website or something like that, that also starts to task that other machines. So better to keep them separate. Possible to do it all on one.
And Peter.
I've done this a few times, and I definitely keep them on separate machines if for no other reason than, and I know Andy wouldn't like me to say this, but every once in a while, ZoomISO has been known to go south on me and take down the machine. So I will just as soon keep the primary control on the regular Zoom client while I'm running the meeting and use ZoomISO to pull the things out I need and control separately.
Next question.
Todd Perry in Prescott and probably not in the forest per se. Is there a preferred frame rate to record Zoom using ZoomISO through an ATEM ISO? This footage would be edited later, and would it just be based on the post-project settings?
Jason?
The short answer is yes. You should be not making work for yourself wherever possible. And in this case, that simply means whatever the project is, that's what you should target for. So if your deliverable, for example, would be 2997 or 30, capture at that because there's no reason to do a frame conversion when you can capture whatever you want live.
And Courtney?
Yeah, what Jason said, 2997 would be the choice for me.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. We're in danger zone here. Anything you're looking for on Prime Day?
Nigel?
Yes, on my Amazon wish list, I have a wish list called Studio. If Amazon would kindly look at that and discount all of those things, I might be able to justify buying some of them.
Because you never know who's watching Office Hours. Go ahead, Bill.
What I'm looking for is a way to avoid it entirely, because I'm trying to get away from push marketing, which is people telling me what I need to buy. Try to live my whole life on pull marketing, which is figure out what I need and then just go get that.
Next question. Oh, sorry, Jesse.
Oh, sorry. Last minute addition. Just to say that GPU prices are coming down quite a bit with this sort of downturn of the Bitcoin market. So I think those are going to continue to be. They're already 20% off or and increasing. So probably a good time to get your vMix GPUs.
Thanks, Jesse. Go ahead, Bill.
For the next one, Nostafa Nege in Surrey in the UK, hope I got that right, ask, I have delivered a load of 8mm film from the 60s, a load of 8mm film from the 60s. I've been trying to find out if there's a way to transfer them to ProRes myself, or do I have to go through a transfer system service?
Jason.
You don't have to, but please do it. Really, this is important stuff. And yes, you can spend whatever, $12,000 for the right thing to scan, and then please just pay for it to be done. There are people that do this all day, every day, and they will do a better job at it than you will on your first shot.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Jason's advice is well taken. In the old days, when we called it a poor man's transfer, we'd set the projector up on a screen and we'd shoot it with a camera. It works.
And Alex?
You just want to make sure not to have it transferred to a DVD. So I'm not kidding. Half of the services are really aimed at consumers who just want the video on a DVD, and they're just going to make it, if you're going to go through the trouble and expense of having someone digitize it, have them scan it, and scan it and deliver you a real file as opposed or telecine, but not just a conversion to DVD. That's the thing you want to try to avoid, so that you really have as much data as you can. Just do this one. This is definitely just do this once. and get the footage back, especially if there's not a ton of it. It's really going to be worthwhile to try to get all the data back, as opposed to something rough. You want the data, you want like a ProRes file or something like that from them, or there's a variety of different scanning platforms, but DVD is not the one you're looking for.
Go ahead, Bill.
I think everybody has covered it. I think that keyword telecine that Alex mentioned, those are people who actually try to do the Hollywood style direct transfer of film onto some digital media, and it's better than somebody projecting it onto a sheet in their bedroom and doing it that way.
And Guy.
Yeah, and if you've taken all the precautions, as the other guys have said, and warm up the film and get it to where it's not going to fall apart, then go ahead and get one of these $29,995 Blackmagic Cintill
do those
scanners.
Do
and
those
there
do
you
Super
go.
8 and 8?
Doesn't do 8mm.
It's a few bucks.
I so want that scanner. I have no need for it, but I so want it. Every time I see it, I actually had the opportunity to sit. Well, anyway, so it's really cool.
There's that push marketing at work. See what you did there, Guy? Next question.
Next question comes from David Brady in New York City. Just pulled about 4 Behringer Ultramatch SCR 2496 AD to DA. That's analog to digital transfers from some conference rooms. Are these things still viable in any workflow, or should they get scrapped?
Jason?
I think it's incredibly useful to be able to go from analog to AES EBU, because that will allow you to take the analog feed that is prone to distortion and ground loops and whatnot, and turn it into something digital. And from there, you can run it as far or as long as you want, or you can dump it into a capture card without penalty. So they're great.
Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris says, had my godson call me about helping him pick out a laptop for college. He's only used Chromebooks and PCs, and IU is recommending a Mac. He's looking to buy once, cry once, and I suggested a 16-inch MacBook M1 Pro. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So with all these things, I would buy as much as you can afford in terms of memory and in terms of hard drive or, SSD space. I don't know you'll see for the sort of workload, unless he's going into a heavy graphics intensive or editing, much difference between M1s and M2s. So look at optimizing around memory and SSD, and then go for the fastest processor you can afford.
Mitchell?
That's good advice. I'd just go to MacBook Air. I think that'll serve you well in college, particularly if you're coming out from a Chromebook or a PC of some kind. It'll do the job.
Yeah, it would really be good to know what program he's in or what he's going to be using it for. Jason?
In college, your computer is way more than your consumption device. It's your movie night thing. It's your people at the dorm, all huddling around a laptop. So along those lines, I would say, no, a 16-inch screen is absolutely worth it if you can afford it. And yes, as much RAM and as much storage as you can afford.
And Peter?
Yeah, I'll echo what Jason just said, which is I would never go to the MacBook Air in a college environment because the screen's too small and you'll be squinting at it a lot for a variety of reasons. So get the big screen and hopefully it'll work for you.
And Courtney?
I would go for the MacBook Air and get an outboard monitor that you plug it into back at your dorm room so that you have a big screen when you're working on it at home, and it's light enough to throw into your backpack to carry around to classes to take notes on, because you're going to regret a 16-inch MacBook Pro being carried around from class to class and having to plug it in to keep it charged all day, and it's a big chunk of aluminum.
Yeah, and it's been mentioned before of wanting to, if you can get as much bang for your buck and going for the newer version, also considering Apple does sell open boxes and or ones that were returned. I've bought a couple of them that have lasted for years. So, when you go Mac, it's really a great tool, a great, you have longer life use with the Mac. Next question.
Next question. Andre Dale of Berlin is up next. Instagram recently announced that you can finally go live by streaming software. Thoughts? And he's got a link there.
Alex?
Yeah, we talked about it already, but what we will do is look at doing some kind of after hours lab, or possibly even just a second hour on Instagram. Maybe we'll get a time to work on it. Maybe schedule that into next week, and see if that makes sense. But I think that might be a good subject for us to kind of cover in more detail, given a lot of us are video producers that have to stream to every platform.
Correct. And Jesse?
I think it's pretty huge news and great that no longer are breaking their terms of service. Definitely, as Alex mentioned, some experimentation is going to be needed because the aspect ratio and the resolution and some of the other things are a little bit quirky and different than a regular stream format. So testing needed, but it's great news.
Next question.
Alex Lindsay, Nevada, California, says, I'm planning a second hour that tests mics under $275 US and include a USB out. Do we have any suggested mics that we should consider?
Go ahead, Jason.
Along those same lines, Bob Heil makes something called the HBA, which is basically just a Bluetooth dongle. It's $99. Just mics? Yeah, no, I don't have anything.
The reason for that is that, so I've had to test a bunch of these, and so I've got the Earthworks one here. We were standardizing on the MB7, which we're still happy with. But then the Samson came up. Someone suggested it on Saturday, and now I have one. and so I'm starting to collect these USB mics. The reason that we want to have these USB mics is because I want something simple to send to people. That is, I'm looking for price performance of, I'm sending these out. I'd like to, be more cost effective. So I was looking at the Samson because it's $120 and not $200. We haven't tested it yet. I mean, table over here, but I haven't actually plugged it in. So I figured I would actually do that next. But I'm just looking for suggestions.
Go ahead, Bill.
I think you should go back to the beginning because Blue and the Blue Bottle and the rest of those were some of the early ones that did that. They're still out there a ton in the used market, so I think it'd be interesting to see where it's come from and if it's improved. Also, don't know whether you're interested in only desktop mics, but there are USB lavaliers that are out there. I know Saramonic makes one and Sennheiser and a few other things that might be an interesting thing to put into the mix.
Yeah,
Courtney?
I'm only interested in desktops.
I look at some of the. I've had pretty good luck with the Audio Technica line, and they make an AT2020 USB Plus, which is a cardioid side address condenser, and I've been impressed with the sound of those. It's $149, so you could try that one out.
And Jesse?
Yeah, a couple of quick recommendations. One is the AT2005 Audio Technica as well. It's a desktop dynamic mic, so especially for spaces where you can get the talent close to the mic or a noisy background, it's a dynamic. The other one is more expensive for sure, but you might be able to find it secondhand or manufacturer redo or something. But the Apogee Hype mic is really great. It's got a little compression feature on it, super small. Comes with both USB cables, and I think they also make one called the Mic C. I haven't tried that, but that's the cheaper version of that Apogee mic, but the Hype mic sounds quite incredible. Oh, someone also put in the Rode NT USB, which also I would say sounds great. It's definitely going to pick up more of the room, though. Yeah.
It's great.
Jason?
What Jesse said.
And Mitchell?
I've been playing around with this little thing called a MikeMe, MIKEME. And it looks like a German company is taking capsules, perhaps seconds capsules. So it's a condenser mic at the $200 price point. That's a USB mic also. And it's a nice little box. I've got one here I can send you, Alex, if you want it.
Sounds good.
And there, actually, this is a popular question in the comments. So someone's also mentioned an Elgato Wave and a PreSonus Revelator USB. So a couple, if you look over in the chat, there's some other recommendations there as well. Thank y'all. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Many higher-end vendors do not post prices publicly, but require you to contact a representative or an authorized reseller for a quote. Could this be because different configurations can have different prices?
Go ahead, Peter.
There are so many layers to that question. One is they want to know who you are. They want to get to know you. So the vendors want you to collect it. They just don't want an anonymous come in through the website and stare around at things. The other is, I used to work for what used to be, you could still say is a high-end vendor, the IBM company, and at the high-end systems, everything was build order, frankly. So they couldn't actually give you a price very well on the system. The other one is availability of components may change the price of a system build system. So it's all of those things coupled together. And I'm sure Nigel could give us chapter and verse on that if he wants to.
Right. And Bill?
Yeah, my experience is that it has to do with distribution chains and how manufacturers do something. Remember that the original, quote, retail price was called MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price, which means that they put a general target there, but the dealer has a lot of leverage in terms of that. But they also do, when they're trying to move out a lot of stuff, the dealer in a relationship like that with a manufacturer will allow them to discount in a certain race for sales and things like that, or if they buy in quantities. So pricing has always been a very flexible sort of thing.
And Courtney?
Yeah, high-end dealers aren't necessarily, the people who are buying that high-end audio gear aren't necessarily price sensitive. So they're not going to be going on, Google or eBay and, sorting by cheapest price and just selecting the one with the cheapest price. And if you list your price, that's how you'll get included in those lists. If you don't list your price, then you won't be included in those lists. And of course, when a dealer doesn't post their price and says, call us for that gives them the opportunity to upsell you on what you wanted into something that they have a much higher profit margin on.
Right. And qualifying the person who's on the other end. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think everyone's made some good points. I'll add two things. Often we don't distribute stuff that have retail prices on them because it gives conflict and people start shopping you about. And high-end products, you don't want that for various reasons people described. The other thing is sometimes people therefore end up wanting to buy things that they may not be technically competent to install. I don't mean that in a patronizing way. I mean that in some of the high-end products that are very complicated, require integration and programming, and the manufacturers don't want to sell them to a consumer because the consumer is going to make a mess of it often, and that will cause their helpline. So that's why they have a dealer network.
And in the chat, Mickey Macachor says some dealers prefer to offer bespoke solutions that package together custom hardware builds along with tailor-to-fit support. And this is a great time to mention, producers, we're running a little low on questions. So if there are ones, no question is too off. This is where we answer all questions. And if we don't have the answer, we'll be sure to look it up and help you. Let's go to the next one.
Chad Lafarge is coming to us from Columbia, Missouri here. If I do not take advantage of this week's big sale events, when's the next best time to buy electronics for production?
Go ahead, Jason.
I would say between a week and a month before you need it, so you have time to learn how to use it, or Black Friday.
And Nigel?
Yeah, always beware of events like Black Friday. You will get good sales, but now we're at the point where manufacturers are producing products for Black Friday sales, which means they are taking down bin chips, they are taking low-end components and forcing them into products. Particularly this is true in the laptops. When you see, oh, my crumbs, that's a $200 laptop, that's a great value. You be careful of what's gone in there because it was something they couldn't find another way of selling. So just, beware of big sales on big technology, that you're getting what you really want.
Courtney?
The end of 2023, because hopefully by then the supply line issues will be ironed out and any excess inventory will be eliminated because new inventory will be coming in with the new chips in them. So you'll get better deals then when there's not a constraint of chip supply, which is making things scarce and expensive.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
For production gear, I like to get on the back end of NAB because they'll have a lot of B stock and stuff that was on display, but it's very specialized. It's not the general commodity devices. You'll never get that B stock.
And Bill.
Yeah, a lot of people have said this, but supply chain is an interesting thing. I mean, they manufacture these things in giant lots. They move them out into the supply chain. The first round early adopters buy them. But as the product gets older and older, they do clear them out. So you tend to see prices softening over the course of time. That's not always true. But we've also had huge supply chain disruptions, and people have been talking about chip shortages and the shipping crisis and things like that. So there's no reason for them to be soft on any prices when there's more demand than there is supply. But in the normal cycle, you would find times of the year before NAB, before the big Christmas holiday, or right after that, you would find people who had a lot of leftover merchandise trying to move it out at low prices. And discount is the traditional way you accelerate the supply chain.
Next question.
Next one comes up from Chris Taylor at Carlsbad, California. Do we think that Zoom will add an option to their live streaming aspect ratio to take advantage of the vertical look of Instagram?
Oh, well, it would be interesting to even think of Zoom doing that because they already dominate in that area, and just people having the expectation. All the other platforms, for the most part, they are social, and Zoom being what it is for events and broadcasting, and it already works really well on mobile. I don't know if they necessarily need to do that. Go ahead, Alex.
So when I first saw the question, I thought, oh, please no, don't do that. Then I thought about it a little more. And I will say that one of the things that 16 by 9 or 9 by 16 tends to do well is people in front of it. If you think about, my frame here, this out here, when people are just talking to each other, is not particularly useful. It's actually something that I've noticed in TikTok is that it actually frames nicely if it's just a person. So people would have to be disciplined. They're on Zoom to fit into that frame, or there might have to be, kind of a smart panner that does head tracking that just kind of softly moves from one place to another, which would actually. So I mean, the Uber solution to this for Instagram would be to have Zoom feed into Instagram and have a head tracker that just does kind of what MainStage does on Apple's stuff or whatever they call that, and it just slowly pans back. It doesn't have to go up and down; it just pans back and forth with the person to keep them into that 9:16. It actually would probably be really heavily used for little discussions on Instagram if Zoom built that feature. And I don't know; it'll take Instagram, a decade to figure that out. How to do what Zoom does. So it'll take Zoom with the current team maybe 6 months. So that's my guess.
And Bill?
Yeah, it was interesting when Instagram started beginning to be popular and I saw more of my clients asking for vertical. I did for a while a thing I called my Red Cross framer. It was like the Red Cross logo, but it had a set of center lines, and all it said was whether I'm shooting full horizontal or full vertical, I can be absolutely sure that this Red Cross center will always be visible no matter what this piece of content goes toward. I abandoned it in a little while because if I really did have to go keep people in the center, they always seemed low and it just didn't seem to work out. But I still think there's some validity in having that around. And I popped it up a few times just to give me the wisdom of I'm used to looking at horizontal frames for my whole career. Pay attention to the vertical space and what might be possible if you want to use it.
Next question.
Alton Christensen in New York City said, thanks for the advice on getting DV into a Mac. Now, is there a quality difference in the adapter paths versus the DEC via SDI path? It's all digits, isn't it?
Go ahead, Guy.
Well, it depends on the path. So when I set this up at the beginning of COVID, I wanted to transfer over a bunch. So I bought that 1500A DEC and I fed SDI out. But then I went into another converter, which was a decimator, to upconvert the standard definition to high definition. And then I had a hyperdeck on the other side, and that was what was laying it into a file. So I actually stuck a USB-C drive on a hyperdeck 8K. And so it was an end-to-end, but I could control in the middle the scaling. And so that's one part I didn't figure out, the piece of the puzzle, which if I wanted to throw a Teranex or something in there to handle any kind of proc amp type adjustments or the important thing is the way that it scales the interlacing, the deinterlacing. So you want to be careful as to how those fields are chosen. And I wound up getting into office hours and not carrying on my project. But nowadays I would probably switch over. If I wasn't doing a lot of this and I had a fast computer, I would invest in this software. There's actually a download you can get to try out. It's Topaz Labs Video Enhance AI. And this is very awesome software. I would definitely run some samples before you go all in on, digitizing hours and hours of footage, because look at the way that it handles some of those interlacing artifacts. So that's what I would do.
And Bill. Oh, sorry, and Courtney.
Well, DV is really just standard def, but maybe a little bit higher, maybe 720 vertical. But you might try getting a digitizer like this that just converts it to H.264 and records it and takes a component in. If you have a component analog out on that camcorder or composite out, this will take either one, and digitize a nice H.264, and then you can bring that in and convert it to whatever format you want at 1080p. So it will scale it up and so on.
Next question.
Next one comes from Josh Kaufman, our friend in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he says, what Gmail alternatives are there for hosting domain email for a business? Budget is a consideration. The desired features include robust calendar and task tools for a business team to collaborate.
Go ahead, Jason.
You start by saying I really like Google for Work. I think it is a really solid product and does a really good job at it. That said, you could use Outlook if you never want to move away from Outlook. As long as you're never going to move away from Outlook, yes, it will work perfectly and play nicely in its own playpen. The other alternative that you may not have thought about is any IMAP compliant email service will work. Any iCal compliant email or calendar service will work. So approach your ISP and say, this is what I need. You may very well end up, if you can find a local shop, getting a hosted solution that is cheaper, but I don't think it'll be better.
Peter?
Second Jason's comment about I really like Google Workspaces because it has all the collaboration tools and all the other stuff that goes with it, and it all works nicely together, including a chat function and a group chat function. So that works really well. I wouldn't have said Outlook per se, because he was actually looking for broader than that. And then you're into the question of what Microsoft M365 license you want. And I'm not a real big fan of that one. So I would really look at the Google Office, and you can brand it yourself.
And Alex?
Zoho makes a lot of alternatives, and there's a couple other ones. There's Smart something or other, and I've worked with companies that use all these alternatives, and they're all about half as good as Google. Just to be clear, like they're half as flexible, half as good, half as stable, and the bottom line is that almost nobody knows how to use them. So like with Gmail, like everybody, and the calendars and everything else. So I guess you would have to have I know people get into this thing about whether Google's reading their mail or whatever. Once you get into the Office stuff, I don't think that's the case. We definitely work with companies that I have to use something else because they have security concerns over Google. So if that's your reasoning for it, I guess you can try to find something. But if you're looking at it just because you're not happy with Google, you're not going to be happier with anything else because it is the best platform for what it does.
And back to you, Jason.
I may address the security thing. I can say fully there is no such thing as secure email unless you are going to secure it before and then decrypt it afterwards. This is just, it's something that people don't know. I'm sure the panel does, but it is a constant struggle for me when dealing with businesses that, no, Google is not reading your email. It may be parsing your email, but that's not the same. And if you're paying for it, not a chance.
And I just want to reiterate, I'm sorry to raise my hand, but you just have to brace for impact, because people like me are just like, you'll just hear this constant as we open someone else's system. You're like, like people just growling at you all the time. So just know that everyone will hate using your platform if it is. The only people who like something different are the people who are in Office 365 and they're embedded in it and they seem to like it well enough. But everybody who is not in Office 365 and it hasn't drank all that Kool-Aid will hate anything you do other than the Google tools, because I've dealt with lots of companies with all of these different tools, and they're just frustratingly, like they just leave out things that we need. That's all.
Next question.
Mitchell Hill's up with this one. If you had to rebuild your Zoom room, what would you do differently?
Jesse.
Well, I just did this for a client and got a i9 12th gen CPU, and I think most of the folks in this group know that Zoom rooms can now do a bunch more NDI outputs, like 6 at 1080 and 12 at 720, and all of that NDI stuff is CPU intensive. So probably want to get the best CPU you can afford, and something with dedicated graphics card. The ones that have like 4 outputs are great. Who knows? Maybe they'll add another physical output on Zoom rooms one of these days. And something with at least 2 network connections is helpful. Or a network dongle or something, so you have that. You can separate your video traffic from your internet traffic if you need to, or your network video traffic.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I kind of was contemplating this question because it's been a year since I joined Office Hours, and I built my room, and coincidentally, I joined Office Hours after I built it. And luckily, I did it in a semi-modular way. I mean, I concentrated on nice lights, nice camera, a nice microphone. But since then, because of my relationship with Office Hours and what Office Hours brings to the party, I've added things on that have made a lot of sense, like Dante, an expensive mic muting system, and other things. And that sort of worked out for me. So To answer my own question, I'd say not a lot. I think I've been able to grow with office hours, and it's been a good relationship.
And Courtney.
Well, electronics are always going to be changing, so you're always going to be envious of whatever just came out. So I'll just say double baffled, low velocity, high volume HVAC, so that you can be comfortable in any weather without blasting sound that's going to destroy all that expensive equipment that you're going to end up buying to capture your video and audio.
And Alex?
I think the hardest part is just that once you get embedded, like I started, this is a last minute thing, and I started with a folding table, a nice folding table, a good wooden one that I spent a lot of money on, but I'm still on it because there's too much gear sitting on top of it. So all I would say is I would think hard about my desk, and I would probably build out a desk that was exactly what I wanted, because knowing now what I know now is that I will go for 2.5 years without changing whatever I put there, because the idea of tearing everything apart is too traumatic because I have to have it working tomorrow morning. And so I would think about the desk.
And John.
So what you do, Mitchell, is you have 2 Zoom rooms. You have one, and when you get tired of that one, you go over to the other one. That's what you do.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri. And Chad says, with vMix, I know I can use a separate instance and NDI for a separate output to support both portrait and landscape formats for multiple streams of the same event. How would you do that in the office hours workflow?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, since the current office hours infrastructure is all built around the ATEM constellation, and it's all 16:9, and our contributions are coming in, 16:9 through Zoom, you're going to have to, center cut, the people to make them portrait. So I would probably bust it out into a whole different show. So if it were me, if I was to do it, I'd do it up in the cloud with the vMix in the cloud and figure out a way, hopefully ZoomISO, Isadora, build it all up there, and then run a totally separate show. And
Alex?
I might try to do this just so we can see what it looks like. I mean, the graphics won't look great and everything else, but I could easily do this in Media Live. We're already sending this to Media Live right now. I could just set another encode that just says grab this and crop it down the center, and it would be what it needed to be. So the only challenge would be we'd have to think about our graphics. We'd have to probably have all of our graphics, which is an interesting problem, is to protect for center, which wouldn't really work for. What's interesting about this is that we could. I know. I don't know how many of the MEs we're using right now, but you theoretically with one switcher or potentially with 2. You could have Isadora and SPX and everything else have a 9:16 and 16:9 version that they were generating just, add a code. So you can still have the web interface, you're just clicking on things of what you want to do that we have for office hours. And it could be cutting 2 different shows. Like it, and it'd be a really interesting problem to solve, is to build a 9:16 show that is a parallel show that has, like, for instance, when you go to SuperSource, it stacks everybody up, or it does something else. Like it does, like all the things were all, like it would build everything. It would be and we're not going to do it yet. But I know there's a whole bunch of people just going, oh no, I thought we were going to HDR. But but that'd be a really interesting output, is to think about how to customize the output for that. Maybe it's a good thought experiment for the moment.
Next question.
Comes from our friend Douglas Carmichael. He says, a local college used infirm/older audiences as a reason to stream major events. When I visited the skilled nursing facility my mom is in, they seem to have an average infrastructure. And so by that, he means small TVs, no Ethernet in room, and so forth. As this generation ages, could that change?
Mitchell?
Well, national demographics are showing that there's going to be quite a few older people in assisted care living, so we need to be able to provide them with the same type of things that we've taken for granted. I know when I moved my mom into a retirement home, she thought that wireless was free, and I had to explain to her that wireless is not a free thing. It's not like radio. You have to pay for that bandwidth that you're using, but to make it simpler for them, I think we owe it to our older Americans, and since I'm quickly approaching that area myself. By the way, I don't consider myself older or infirm, but maybe someday.
Bill?
20 years from now, if you walk down the halls of a skilled nursing facility and find a voice down the hall screaming, "I need more bandwidth," it's going to be me. So I think there is going to be more and more requirement for that as time goes on.
The entire panel. Nigel, real quick.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to rebuild some of those buildings. They're going to have to really think about the infrastructure, and Wi-Fi is the answer. Ethernet requires cabling, and they're not going to spend the money. They're going to have to rebuild.
And Courtney.
Yeah, you don't want to string cables around something where people could trip over them and you could be sued. So Wi-Fi 6 is going to be the thing that should be installed, and by then all of us, which will be in the nursing homes, everyone.
Next question.
Next week.
Next question comes from Liberty White in Toronto, Ontario. There was a nationwide outage in Canada last Friday with a major internet company, Rogers. How would you handle that situation if you had to live stream production during the outage?
Go ahead, Alex.
So in some cases, there's nothing to be done about it. It depends on how deep you were into that puzzle. Now, this is also why we often have our production headquarters somewhere very different than the actual event. The actual event. So basically, what happens is that we have satellite trucks, we have live views, we use the local internet. But a lot of times we're not depending on the local connection to get the internet out. And that does a couple things. One is that it lets us kind of manage, that we can cut between multiple sources that are coming in, but it also gives us some redundancy. And that means that we could at least put up a slide. Now, one of the advantages that you would have here is if you were doing this out of like the cloud, like AWS, you could theoretically have a slide function that just dropped a graphic into it. And we build that all the time for O9O. We have some pretty complex AWS systems that allow us to do many, many streams at one time. But one of the other things that they can do is insert graphics. so you can have a "we'll be right back" slide or film or movie that plays out when something goes horribly wrong.
And Peter.
Well, you can also go down to the basics, and I agree with that. There's sometimes you can't win. You can guard against certain things, but you can't win. But in the case of guarding against certain things, there was a point in time in my career where I actually had 2 WANs coming into my house that were 2 different carriers and used a Linksys LRT modem that actually had dual WAN inputs and would dynamically switch between them. You could set which one was primary and one was secondary. Those things still exist today. And you'd be surprised. I think, Alex, you've talked about this. You've been in places where 5G on your phone is amazing.
I think
for just command and control, if nothing else.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that the real challenge is when 911 goes down, you usually have a pretty good case to talk to your client that says, well, 911 went down and we couldn't. Because the real issue there was it took everything out. Like it is, you may not even be able to hear from your crew. This is, and it is something to think about, is how do you sort that out? And at times, there really are just times when the live stream goes out and you have to just shrug because there's nothing else you can get done. That hasn't happened very often. Usually, I can count that on one hand how many times it's happened where it was really not anybody's fault and it just there was something massive. We had one where Facebook cut one piece of fiber and then we couldn't stream all on the East Coast. And wow. We've seen YouTube brown out in Virginia and up the East Coast, mostly East Coast for some reason. A lot of fiber being garbled around anyway. But so then there's sometimes you just have to tell the client, well, that service went down. One of the advantages is use multiple services and multiple outputs.
Yeah, it was horrible. I didn't have a show or anything like that, but just to your point, all their communications went down. So even people being able to use their phone. And so it definitely triggers a lot of just thinking about redundancy and, well, what happens if everybody goes out? Yeah. So, yeah. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and he wonders, what are your production carry go-tos? I had to replace my SCOTTeVEST, and I'm looking for what other people have found useful.
Jason?
I'm going to take this as kind of a generic, instead of a piece of clothing. My favorite production kind of carry things is the Fotassi Quick Strap, and I'll put the link in Mukana.
Jesse?
I mean, if you're talking about equipment, it's always way more equipment than you need. But personal effects, comfortable shoes, a lot of water, and snacks that don't make a mess, so you don't have to rely on craft services or anything.
Courtney.
There's a reason why the uniform on set is cargo shorts. It's because they've got lots of pockets with zippers, and you can put equipment in them and carry them around. And besides that, I like to use laptop bags from Amazon Basics. They're, ballistic nylon. They have a lot of different pockets. They're padded, and I can carry a bunch of stuff in them. They're cheap, about $15 a piece.
Bill?
The one thing I carry to every set now is a side-worn small flashlight. I have one from Coast, and the reason I like it has two buttons on the top that are knurled, and you can feel them in the dark. It has one red light LED and one white. The white is very bright. I can't tell you the number of times I've been working in a production circumstance where I've needed to track a cable or something like that. I'm under a table. There's no light there. I can't find anything, and that thing has saved me more times than I can tell you. Also, a thing that I didn't expect, but I've learned, is that if I'm looking even in a big Pelican case and I'm trying to find something, that bright light in one corner says, just look at this corner. Don't get confused by the visual distraction. And then as I move it around, I make sure that I check to see if that thing that was misfiled is in that. I just find that extra light and focus to be really useful on set.
And Alex.
I use a SCOTTeVEST Revolution is the one that I use, and I can fit 40 pounds of gear if needed to pull out of a bag to make weight at an airport into that jacket, because it's not a bag, it's a jacket. So the Revolution is the one I use. I use a Rush 24 backpack generally, and then I usually, Eddie Bauer has some nice pants with one cargo pocket. I like zippers on my cargo pockets. That's my whole thing, is that I only buy cargo pockets with zippers, because otherwise I'm always afraid things are going to fall out.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mike Beardmore and reading in the UK. And when would you use package export in Keynote, he wonders.
Jason?
Almost always. That's that simple.
Next question.
Okay, got through that one. Andre Dalle in Berlin says, recommendations for a cheap HDMI to USB capture card that doesn't do the black color shifts with which ATEMs do.
The black color shifts. Alex?
So I will say that I've noticed there's a black color shift that it crushes the blacks a little bit going into YouTube. Here's the interesting thing, is it doesn't do that going into QuickTime. So I'm not certain it is the ATEM itself. So I haven't, like, when I actually look at that output and I compare it in QuickTime, I'm not certain that I'm seeing the same black issues that I see in Zoom itself.
Jesse?
You can buy things secondhand that are still pretty decent, especially if it's built well in the first place. So you can look at the Magewell cards. Those are pretty great. And it seems like there are some number of knockoff cards that look exactly like the Magewell cards. I'm not sure if they're made by the same company with a different stamp on them, but they may be the same. I'm not sure. You have to test them.
And Peter?
Well, I maybe I misread this, but I don't know of an HDMI to USB true capture card, but I do know of a capture device, which is the CamLink 4K, which takes HDMI in and spits it out as USB 3.1 and sends it to your computer. So, and they're on sale right now on Amazon, certainly. And I have a couple of them. They work very well. But I agree with Alex that I don't think it's the card that's crushing the blacks. I mean, I can look at Alex here on Zoom and the two versions of him, and his colors are crushed between the two.
Go ahead, Alex.
Based on recent experience, I would probably not get the CamLink anymore. I own one. In fact, I own a couple of them. We have found that they overheat over long periods of time. So, if you're going to leave it on, we've had now multiple times where it overheated at an hour and a half. So it's coming from a Sony A7. I don't know if it's a specific thing, but Sony A7S to CamLink, and twice now we've had it fail, and it's come down to the CamLink. So we just a note. For short stuff, it seems to work fine. But once someone's sitting there for a long time to prep for a show and then they're on the show, problematic.
And Courtney?
Well, there's always the cheap Chinese group. If you're price sensitive, there's tons of these on eBay and Amazon that are like $14.99 or $15 that go from HDMI to USB. And I think Doug Johnson did a nice video on comparing a lot of these cheap all those cheap ones use the same Chinese chipset. So they're pretty much all the same, different brand names. That one was a Woonimut. They all have funny names. But he compared them to the higher end Elgato's capture cards and so on. And a lot of the time there was very little difference. But look for Doug Johnson's review, and he reviewed about 10 or 20 of them, I think.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, when I read an article about the use of video calls, and he specifies Zoom or FaceTime, to connect families, I thought of the many times I've watched office hours or after hours over my 802.11n Wi-Fi and had micro stutters. Wouldn't Wi-Fi networks congest easily with multiple video streams?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, the frequency can become saturated, but really what you're getting there are packets which arrive out of order or aren't being transmitted in a way that can be dropped in random ways by any router that's kind of along the line. So, yeah, that's part of it. But really the issue is that if the first part of my sentence arrives my last part of my sentence arrives before the first part of my sentence, then the whole thing has to just get flushed, and then it starts over. That's the issue.
Next question.
Graham Cardwell, Belfast, Northern Ireland. Any suggestions why we might be getting random frame duplications, jitter, in our 1080 live stream on Wirecast? It was working fine in 720. Data video PTC 150 to ATEM 1 ME Production Studio 4K to data video Cap 1 to Intel i9 PC using Wirecast to YouTube.
Go ahead, Alex.
You want to look at your CPU usage. If the CPU usage is hitting anything over 60% on Wirecast, you may start having frame issues. Wirecast is pretty fragile. And if it's showing an average of 60, it's probably having peaks somewhere else. And you're probably going to notice those when you're doing transitions from one scene to another.
Next question.
Chris Taylor in Carlsbad, California. When can we do a second hour or lab or many on a start-to-finish AWS, Amazon Web Services clinic?
We've had some conversations about that and bringing that back. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, if the folks that are interested in talking about it, AWS, we can get all the folks that are willing to jump on and be great and do it. I don't think what I think is slowed things down is that the folks that did some of the AWS stuff in the past did such a great job, but it was an enormous lift for them. I mean, the amount of work that they put into building that was just incredible, and it made a huge difference in the world. There's there's people who in danger zones that used those second hours to think about things. So anyway, it was a really valuable resource. But I think that what I would prefer is to just have a bunch of AWS experts on once a month to answer people's questions. Like, here's what you want to think about, and here's how and answer those. And that might be something we can put into the new, maybe a video day or something that we try to see if we can attract 5 or 6 of our experts that are within the group to just jump on and answer questions as people work through it, as opposed to trying to build something out that takes too much time that we only do every 6 months.
Next question.
Comes from Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and he wonders, is there a platform where you can get a free meeting that's longer than the 30 minutes you get in basic Zoom, or is a subscription the best way?
Jason, real quick.
Okay, you're going to hate me for this one. FaceTime is absolutely cross-platform. You can get away with it there. That's about it. And
Alex.
It's so frustrating. FaceTime is like, and then it always wants to call that way. I'm a big Apple fan, as you know, but FaceTime is not something I use by choice. Once you call someone on FaceTime, then I don't want to do that all the time. And so anyway, I think that I would really highly recommend the base subscription. It's not that much money in it. Wow. It's pretty useful what we get.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, when the article talked about intelligible audio and captions being important for an older audience, wouldn't most SNFs, LTCFs not have the smart spaces, with apologies to Nigel, to present said content in a high-quality manner? And I apologize for not looking up the acronyms earlier.
Courtney, real quick.
That stands for secure nursing facilities and long-term care facilities for those of us that'll be checking in just momentarily. Well, one thing you have to realize, Douglas, as you get older, your eyesight gets worse and your hearing gets worse. So yes, to your answer that you may require altered frequency response, but the visual acuity is not going to be that great, so you don't need to make sure everything's in 8K or 4K super high def, because most people in those facilities won't be able to appreciate it. So you don't necessarily need the highest quality of sound reproduction and visual reproduction, maybe just the loudest and the personalized, headphones for people so that they can hear without disturbing others.
Next question, we're just going to round these out till we get to LinkedIn, talking about LinkedIn.
Sure. Douglas Carmichael's up next. In a discussion of work from home, it was mentioned how informal relationships are important for careers. Could a moderated virtual platform with a credentialed facilitator be useful for family mediation, conflict resolution work?
Bill?
Yeah, I'm sure it could be. One of the things you have to deal with, though, is HIPAA. If there's any kind of a therapeutic relationship with medical personnel, privacy is going to be absolutely paramount. So if you're trying to build something out about that, just make sure that you're aware of that.
All right. Thank you so much to our producers for those questions. And we definitely want to wrap those up for you, even though we're a little bit over. But we're going to make this transition to talk about LinkedIn and the power of LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn started in 2003. And at that time, it really was focused on it's a network for a platform for professionals. And so while you had the likes of just trying to get to connect to professionals in job recruiting and for companies that are looking for talent, but they have evolved tremendously, and especially with brands and platforms like Facebook and Twitter coming out, there were certain elements that they started to include as well. But what we're going to really focus on, especially in the Monday audience, is a combination of technical and producers, but then also the business professionals. And we won't touch on Sales Navigator or using LinkedIn ads, not in this one, because I am looking at building that out. And probably in a couple of months, I am bringing on Cher Jones, and she does a lot on LinkedIn and professional branding. But what we'll go over today are some of the new tools that they've released, especially with creator mode. And what I do want to do is share screen so that I can walk through some of these elements with LinkedIn. And give me one moment to do that, get this going here. All right. Alrighty. So when you are on LinkedIn, it is a great tool if you are looking at thought leadership. And for those in our community that are either you are the CEO and or you are a freelancer, there's an opportunity for you to tell your story, share your wins online. And the most important thing that you want to look at is right here in your bio. And that title, and I'll just go in. So this is my LinkedIn page. And I'll go in and just editing when you're looking at, once you put your name in, this headline right here, instead of just saying that, I'm the executive director, that entire just the producer and like where I currently work, but that entire line enables you to say a little bit more about yourself. That way, when people are searching, and that does show up in the LinkedIn search. And that way, so I've done a little keyword stuffing here with broadcast, live, and video marketing and leading a team. But that comes up, not only comes up in search, but it comes up in search, LinkedIn search, but it also comes up in the Google search part of things. And if we scroll down a little bit more here and we look at, there are the analytics. I'm going to kind of just scroll past that part of things to jump to creator mode. And that's the new feature that they released, where that gives you a few more tools to do things like LinkedIn audio, which is the most newest one. They haven't released it to everyone just yet. I don't have it yet, but I'm looking forward to getting it. But you need to have creator mode turned on. So for any of you that are right now, you can go ahead and try that. If you don't have creator mode turned on, if you're watching this on replay, that once I click inside here, I have it turned on. But what creator mode allows you to do is you can add keywords here as well, so that as people are searching on LinkedIn, because ultimately if you are from the business based, you are looking for people. This is a way for them to find you as well. If they're using hashtags in posts, or they're searching hashtags, that you're most likely to come up into search. So you have up to 5 that you can put in there. But then here, this is where it shows those tools that you're able, and you can see if you have the ability to turn on LinkedIn Live. Now, I had LinkedIn Live, they released it, I want to say it was 2018. By the end of 2019, I'm grandfathered in. But for those of you who do not have LinkedIn Live, go ahead and see if you have that, because they have spent some years to roll it out to more people. And then now you're also able to do newsletters. And we've spoken a lot about just curating your audience, building community, and being able to do newsletters to people who already follow you. There are pros and cons to it, but you have that capability, because for a long time, that was only creating newsletters were only for a select group of people, more the verified influencers. And the only way that you could really broadcast information, apart from doing posts, apart from posting videos, would be to write articles on your page. But this way, you also get to capture people's email addresses as well. So again, just turning on creator mode. And here's why I say that having creator mode is important, because if I were to do this right now and I go into create a post, you can now create events on LinkedIn. And I'll show you what an event looks like. Actually, I'll just go into the search and go for events. Let's do audio, so I can also show you what audio looks like. Audio events. And then what I'm going to do here is, so you have options here on how you want to filter your search terms. So I am looking for audio events here, and it shows the lists that are coming up. And that's a combination of just generally people on LinkedIn, but then also there are people that I'm connected with that they are using events, and that shows up in my feed as well. So if I click on this Microsoft one, this is what an event page comes into. And the benefits of being able to create an event and have it, not only will you be able to actually, when you broadcast, you can broadcast in here, and I might come back and show an example of what that looks like, but the broadcast will show up on the page. So if we talk about trying to make it really easy for people when they are engaging with your content and making that easy, that they just click one button, it shows up, the notifications goes to their LinkedIn, the notification goes to their inbox, so that they can just click and show up at your event. That's what is really beneficial. And this event in particular, as you see here, they've got a lengthy amount of content here, but for a B2B brand, when you actually click, so it shows that it's online, but their event link here It takes you to a landing page. So if we talk about trying to not only, when you're using LinkedIn, to not only try to, you're not just broadcasting, but you're actually trying to create conversions, this landing page takes you to a place where now they've optimized it for other events that they're having, and you can click through and actually purchase. These are, just waiting for that to load for a moment, but these are actual ticketed that you can add to cart. So for those of you, and part of why I share this as well is, while you might just be the event production team, this is just having this knowledge and these nuggets in your back pocket. You may be able to add, not maybe, you'll be able to add more value to your client, and just showing them ways that they can further provide value for their audience as well. And then just jumping back to LinkedIn. So that was just showing the personal side of things. What I also want to just quickly show, there's also the company page. So on the company page, that enables you to, just like the business page, but that will go directly to your business, to your brand. That's your ability to share more concentrated information, because on your personal page, there may be things that you're sharing, some wins. You might share a couple of personal things because you do want to show that you are human and commenting. So a lot of those notifications pop up on your personal page, but on the company page, that's where you can really just work on growing your audience, showing your expertise in that area. And I will stop sharing for a moment there so that I can make sure that I can see everyone on that side. And Nigel, I'll let you jump in on LinkedIn and some of the ways that you're using it.
So that was great. I'm going to have to go back and watch that. That was so much content so far. So I've already checked like 4 things. So thank you for that. And I don't know whether this is really the right time for the conversation. Now I've listened to that, and we may be going down the more technical line. I am struggling a bit with LinkedIn. I mean, I canceled my Facebook account 2 years ago personally because I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I've noticed a shift in LinkedIn to sort of, it's becoming a little more Facebook. Again, it may be just the people I'm following, but it's becoming less professional and more personal and social. And I wonder whether that's changing the way people use LinkedIn, or what you would do with LinkedIn, because I've noticed I'm going less and less often now.
Yes, you are correct. I've seen a lot of people share their grievances with that. But there are some pros, and while you shared the cons, there are some pros to that with the personality and people showing their personality. There are definitely some folks, just that LinkedIn etiquette might not necessarily be there. It is shifting. However, LinkedIn on YouTube, their product team has a channel on YouTube, which is tremendously valuable. They have been talking a lot about the changes that they've been making, their focus on, again, outside of Sales Navigator and actually creating ads, but they're trying to have what is, if you look at it here of like LinkedIn, and then you've got the individual and them working on possibly their personal brand, or maybe, I should say them like being the job seekers. So you have those folks, but then they're really trying to also tap businesses that are looking at the long tail, where they understand that they've got to pump out, content. That's why we've got the events. That's why we've got live. That's why we've got, audio. And they're trying to help businesses build relationships with people. So I believe that's part of where you are seeing some Facebook elements, but LinkedIn is very much aware of where they are and trying to make some of those changes. Alex?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend not being real personal on LinkedIn. like that's not like, there's like, I think that it's a mistake for people to put things up that are their political views or their other views or whatever. Is just it's kind of a disastrous thing, because most companies at this point most large corporations will search all of your social postings back as far as they can, and some back farther than you can see. So, there's companies that are basically hoovering up all your tweets, for instance. They'll hoover those up over every day, all of them, for decades, at this point. And so, or for over a decade, even though you can only see the last 5 years in Twitter, they can see back to when you started. And so you have to remember that, because I only say that because back in 2008, I posted something because Twitter was new and I was new and I was saying something and you're trying to be snarky and stuff like that. And then someone pulls up a tweet that you said that you did, 10 years before. And you're like, I don't remember saying that, and so you just have to be, you have to be very careful on social media in general. But if they don't search all your social media, I guarantee they'll look at your LinkedIn. So, I would definitely be streamlined, about what you put there. I'm pretty careful. I don't post a lot on LinkedIn, and I'm pretty careful about that. The other thing that I think that I tweak a little bit on LinkedIn is, number one is InMail. Wow. Like, you really better have a good reason to, probably the number one reason I stopped going to LinkedIn because I got to a point where I was kind of doing it every day. All these emails from people I don't know that want to sell me something really, really were a bummer. And I know that they definitely made more money doing that after Microsoft bought them, but it just has been really like a painful, I just hate all that InMail. And so that's a real bummer. I also would be very careful about, I kind of always say this, but in general, the posts of, I think that you think that it sounds good or people think that this sounds good of like, I really want to thank whatever company for allowing me to work on their project. And, there's that thank you, but it's kind of a humble brag kind of post. Everybody knows what that is. It's not everybody knows what you're doing. And so it's not like, I think that people think that it comes off softer than it does. And so you're just kind of like, okay. Like when you look at it, and it doesn't bother me as much as I just go, oh, okay, And
what's the better way to address that? Because there are a number of people, because it is a way of you're showing not only that you worked on the project, but it's the tactics of tagging people and showing that. So what's a better way to frame that for folks that really? Go ahead.
I will say that the way I post, and I don't post very much to LinkedIn, mostly because I'm nervous about it. I don't want to come across that way. When I post to those things, I'm really just trying to talk about something that is of service to the people who I'm connected to. So I looked at this, or this is something we did, and it might be, this is something we did at this event that was interesting. Like we did this event. Now, generally, I work on events that I can't talk about. So I don't have a lot I can't post generally things that I work on. So that's not usually an option for me. But when I post it to LinkedIn, if you go back and look at mine, they're mostly about things. And I don't do it very often, but they're about I'm working on this, I'm always working on one that I'm going to eventually post on LinkedIn about office hours. And but it's not about like, hey, look at office hours. It's really like, here's what we've learned. We've learned this and we've learned this. And so I'm trying to, and this is kind of how I approach all content, is that I want whatever that comes out as to be, one of three things, which is it's got to educate, entertain, or inspire. And those are the three things that one of those three it has to touch on. And if it doesn't do one of those three, I usually don't post anything, And so I think that, and I stole that from my father. My father speaks, and all of his things have all three of those things, when he speaks. And so, but I think that those are the filters that it kind of goes through. If you watch on Twitter, it's mostly, I'm designing that mostly to entertain, sometimes too, but mostly entertainment. A little bit of education, some inspiration, but in LinkedIn, it really is mostly education, then a little bit of inspiration, and every once in a while entertainment. But that's usually not what I look at for LinkedIn. And LinkedIn and Twitter are the only two platforms I really spend any time on.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, for me, I don't even think this is a term. It's kind of a portmanteau, but I've been disappointed in the Chamber of Commerceification of LinkedIn over the course of time. When I first started going there decades ago, it seemed like it was an interesting thing, but it was mostly those promotional things. I went through a period in the middle where I saw the politicization of a lot of the discussions there. They got toxic. I kind of pulled back again. And lately, I've been more interested because more people. But I'm wondering, it's kind of the change when who was it that bought them? One of the big monsters.
Yeah, Microsoft.
Microsoft. It seemed at that point that my feeling was they were after growth, and one thing that does in the social network era create growth is those conflict conversations, and I just hope they manage to figure out a way. I mean, one of the things that is the best, I think, about what Alex has done here is make sure that lack of politicization has been a key cornerstone of office hours since the beginning, and everybody here gets along regardless of where you are on whatever spectrum, and it's calming. It's better to have these safe spaces where we can, and I wish LinkedIn had more of that. I'm just tired of getting down 3 levels in the comments and everybody is just yelling at each other for some perceived thing. It's weird.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, one person that if you're into artwork and so on and so forth that really uses LinkedIn really, really well is a concept designer named Coley Wirtz. It's Wertz. Coley. With a C. He's an old friend of mine. I've known him since before I was at ILM. But he was at ILM and now he's a concept artist at Marvel Studios. And what he's really good at is he just throws up things that will entertain you. But it also happens to show off that he's, one of the best concept designers in the world. And so he says, oh, here's a little napkin scat. It'll always be like, I started this on a napkin. I took a picture of it and finished it in Procreate. And you just want to watch the time lapses and the images and you're just amazed by what he's putting up there on LinkedIn. And, I really think he mostly does it just for fun. Like, I don't think there's a lot of, but I will say that if you want to see someone who really takes advantage of LinkedIn, he posts that stuff relatively often. And it's inspiring. It's inspiring to watch what he does, and it makes you want to use Procreate, and it makes you, know that it allows him to show off his skill set, in front of you without saying anything. He just something that will entertain you.
Yeah, there are a number of people who do that really well, and now I'm gonna have to look into that to see. I wanted to because I saw that. Sandhir, forgive me if I butchered your name, in the comments, he made a really good point that I want to show that as well, that if you are of that belief that the way in how you present yourself on LinkedIn and not wanting to those humble brags, there are features that you're able to use. I'm going to back out of this for a second, but if I go back to my profile, that you'll be able to see here, I've pinned like some articles that have been written, some case studies that we've done. So you are able to post those elements on your profile. Again, that is a way for, if it is thought leadership and you're trying to show your expertise, that you can put that kind of information there. And, or if you are a freelancer and you want to show some of your work, that is a great place to do that. I want to quickly just show one more thing where in how to add those creating those LinkedIn events. So if I were to go here and I hit on create, and then many people just post, but there's so many other features in adding documents is another great way. It's almost like having a slideshow in your posts, but you want to, and creating polls, being interactive, but use them sparingly as you've learned through the watching office hours. But if I click down here to create an event, and you are able to, change your hero image here, this being online. And if I hit right here, and this is why I shared earlier about turning creator mode on, because now I have the ability to either go create an LinkedIn Live, which means it'll go live and broadcast specifically on the LinkedIn event page and or the external link. So that example that I showed earlier where they did the lead generation idea of like having an external link, that's what they did with this one. But here I'm going to go live. I'm going to show it going live, and I'm actually going to use StreamYard as the back end. I will say that this is office hours. I'll just say office hours lab. I'll say that this is happening later on today, and this is a test. Of course, you will put the proper information for your event, and I am the speaker. If you have speakers, again, the benefit being that once they accept, the notifications go out to their network and just, helping to increase the eyeballs on it. I will share going live for office hours. Yes, join me and throw in a couple of hashtags. You don't want to hashtag load your post. The best number to work with is 3 to 5. Don't do any more than 9, because when you do, LinkedIn, the algorithm's like, oh, you're spamming people. So I'll just put event profs. There's some recommendations that you see that come up, and live stream and tutorial. I'll leave those there. And once that goes to post, I'm going to quickly hop over to StreamYard. And if I go and I want to create a new broadcast, and I'm saying that I want it to go to my LinkedIn Live, sorry, let me back out for a second and refresh. Sorry, just find that tab. All right, and StreamYard, create the broadcast. And yes, LinkedIn, StreamYard, test. And I will leave that going dark. So when I actually want to go live, it is going to pop up inside here. And there is StreamYard asks, are you looking to create something new, or are you trying to connect it to an existing broadcast? And that's where inside StreamYard, you will be connected to the existing broadcast, and that will push out. So I'm going to end that lab part there so that we can dive into the questions.
And our first one, it appears, comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. And Andy says, we presently use LinkedIn Live via the API in restream.io. Is there a way to stream directly to LinkedIn Live media servers?
Alex.
I believe they're still all API. I don't think there's any RTMP input. So and the advantage of doing that API is it means that they can keep on updating it. So the problem that they have with it, the reason you're probably wondering why don't you do HLS or RTMP, it's because people will get those settings in there and then they just keep sending them to them that way. By having an API, it means they can get, whether it's Wirecast or OBS or StreamYard, they can get them they can update those even from the server, telling the encoder, this is what I want to get. And it makes it much easier for them to develop their pipelines ongoingly. So that's why a lot of folks resist an RTMP ingest these days if they can.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next with, would there be LinkedIn groups and or consulting services for those on the autism spectrum or with other disabilities that provide career support specific to that population?
Alex?
I don't know of any specifically, but I can't imagine that those aren't there somewhere.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
Next question.
Our friend Hasbek Ajar in Cape Town, South Africa. He says, I wrote an article, Zoom Fatigue, How to Avoid the Digital Death Trap. I shared this article from my personal LinkedIn profile. Do you encourage this or suggest to avoid this type of post?
Alex?
I think that's exactly the kind of post that I would post. Like right. Thought pieces, thinking about things, talking about subjects that are important to everyone. Those are, in my eyes, that's exactly what you should be posting on social media.
Yeah, because you're providing value. It's not that you were necessarily just, and I remember that article, Hasmaki, it's not like you were just touting and tooting your own horn. You were actually being very critical, being very thoughtful in that. And that's what people, and it's great keywords as well. So that's what that kinds of articles and the kinds of content that people are looking for. Because just imagine those event planners that may be out there, and they are putting those keywords in the search. That enables, because it is an article that you have, putting that in your LinkedIn article, that enables it to pop up. Nigel?
So I have a question for Liberty. So I have a Substack. I post to personal stuff. I mean, not personal stuff, but non, office hours related around subjects that I'm interested in. And then I post a link to that on LinkedIn. Is that an effective tool, or should I be doing a completely new article in LinkedIn?
There are people that have different opinions on that, where they're like, no, don't replicate. I would say if there are some adjustments, I was trying to find Giselle Mello she runs a fund, and she does a phenomenal job with, it goes directly to her website where you can click through to the full article, but she just parse part of it in her posts on LinkedIn. So I would say that is the better strategy, because you've kind of teased it out. You've given them a little bit of what to expect, and then you having further details there. So I think being able to use both of them, especially since if you know your target, and even in this conversation, it's about knowing where your target audience is. And if this is where your audience lives, that you want to show up for them and show value for them as well. Jesse?
So I think it feels like to me the LinkedIn platform is designed to describe your skills, and it's sort of like an online digital resume in a way, and you can even upload your resume. So, I think, some of these posts about what people have done in the past as far as projects and stuff can be useful to companies, especially the ones that ask you, can I see your portfolio and stuff like that. So I think there's some validity in posting that kind of stuff. And there is a level of, as Alex mentioned, like the humble bragness or whatever of some things. But I've also been in interviews, even in recent times, when people said, we deal with a lot of top level, clients and C-suite folks and stuff like that. Can you just name some of the folks that you've worked with? So sort of like basically name dropping, as it's called. And so in some arenas, folks actually want to hear about that stuff, and I would say in the AV world, in the production environment, it's quite common that people want to see your portfolio of work. So where is the line around that? I'm kind of just curious about that.
Yeah, it's, and part of even bringing this LinkedIn concept together is, one, so we can kind of have folks test out the waters, because I have Cher Jones coming in roughly a month where she'll dive into it even more as it relates to your brand. So I think that'd be a great question for when Cher comes in. But it's about testing and seeing how people react to how you share things. I know for some of the companies that we work with that they don't post a lot, but when they show up, it is they're showing up, and they've got a consistent podcast that they're broadcasting live on, and in that content they're sharing their wins. So you are correct in saying it is your public resume, your public portfolio, and this is where you really need to know how people will react. Because if, someone like Alex or some of the other folks that of their just thoughts of how you present yourself, well, are those the people that you're trying to get in front of at this stage, or really knowing what kind of content that they would be looking for? So this is a very tactical conversation that we're having today, but that's part of the strategy and understanding how to connect with your what they're looking for, your actual target audience and end user. Alex?
Yeah, and I mean, I put if I can talk about it, I put who I worked with in my resume. That's in LinkedIn. I do agree with you that that is my primary resume at this point. I don't really have, if someone asks me for like a printout of a resume, I cut and paste what I put into LinkedIn back into the, and just send them that. Like that's what I have there. So I'm not, but if I can say that, and I believe that there's a portfolio function. I don't think I've used it, but believe there's actually a portfolio function inside of LinkedIn that you can put that in so that but I'd be careful of using posts to do that. That's the thing that I think sometimes, using the post to do the kind of humble brag thing, I will say that, and I don't know how everybody reacts to it. I just kind of roll my eyes, like when people do that. Now, what's interesting is that there are some people though that will post things about, hey, here's a cool thing I just worked on, and like I remember I had a friend that someone I'm connected to LinkedIn, and they showed like we scanned this facility with a BLK 360, and this is what it looked like, and this is what it took to do it, and it wasn't a humble brag. It was like literally like we did 18 nodes, and it was very to the point. We did 18 nodes, and here's a fly through of what it looked like, and here's why we're using it, and this is what's useful about it. I read the whole thing, watched the whole thing, and then of course I had him scan something for me later. I was like, hey, can you scan that? Because I was like, I know he has a BLK 360, and he knows how to use it. And so I think that posting useful like reports from, I guess what I look at is, thanking people to work on something is not something I respond to very well. Posting things about what you learned in a production or something cool that you built up on it without any kind of selling point, like what ruins all of that is that you get to the end and they go, and we're available for your service. Like you're like, okay, an ad. So
it was salesy.
Yeah, it's like, and so you kind of give up all of that real quickly. But I think that when you can post it as just again, like Coley is a good example of a person who just posts stuff that are cool. He doesn't care like if you hire him or not. And again, he's just you wanted to come from a position of, I'm sharing something that I'm excited that I learned, that I'm trying to share with you, that I learned something new, and here's what it is. No call to action, no try to return, no nothing. Just this is something that's useful for you. And I find that I've gotten an awful lot of work that way in different social networks of people that just know what we do, what you do, but without a specific reference or any kind of salesy nature to it.
All right, Jason.
Yeah, I would call this a meta brag. The idea is taking the thing and saying, isn't this cool? And then not saying anything other than here it is. And the takeaway isn't, aren't I great? It's isn't this great? And then, that's the difference.
Whoops, you are muted, Liberty.
Yes. Now let's jump into our questions.
Nigel Dessau at Austin, Texas. How are we still limited to what platforms can stream to LinkedIn?
Yes. So there are Restream. You can use Restream. You can use StreamYard. I believe I might be missing one or two. Those are just the ones that we've used in the past when it comes to. So yes, there's still some limitations, but who knows if that will change in the next little bit, since they are consistently working on their live offerings. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, for someone seeking both technical and creative positions, would it be appropriate to share creative work on your LinkedIn page? Electronic music I've produced, for example.
Definitely encourage that, as we shared in the first part of this conversation, of it being where you're showing your work, going back to the idea of the value, or even talking through how you have done something. That's what that goes back to the tenet of, Alex mentioned the entertain, educate, and inspire. That's one of those tenets that, okay, well, you've worked on some electronic music, possibly showing the behind the scenes, and then that actually stretches out your content. So you could probably have a couple of posts around your process in doing that. People are always intrigued. And again, it goes back to showing things like either your thought leadership and or your ability to learn new things. So that's a way, when we talk about putting out personal that's a way of these are the things that I'm interested in, and I'm sharing it with the world. Alex?
Yeah, and the only thing I would caution is to always be sure of what you're posting. from a perspective of look at a lot of other things that are being posted there, look at online and make sure that you think that your stuff is going to be something people are impressed with and want to do something with, as opposed to, that's laying something in concrete of this is the level of my skill set right now. And so oftentimes I tend to make sure that I'm really doing something that is going to get people to go, oh, before I put it up there.
Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Up next, what are the best practices for posting content and or engaging with content from others? In other words, how does a person get the best return on time spent without getting sucked into yet another social media black hole?
Putting a timer on. That's how you try not to get sucked into the black hole. But there are folks that I know that they show up every day for, say, 30 minutes. And that is the time that they dedicate to commenting. Someone in our community, Ray Franklin, does a phenomenal job, in my opinion, on LinkedIn, where he will comment, he will like on people's posts, especially people in the office hours community. I know this because one of the benefits of just having notifications on, if you're apt to that, is that I see what he's liking and commenting on. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Like this is, Guy did this or Jonas did that. And it just brings an awareness. So best practices just being knowing what you're going there for, putting those timers on to help you through that. Commenting is beneficial. As I shared, when you comment, that triggers your network if they have notifications on. So if they do not, they won't be able to see it, but it does send that out to other people, and people spend a lot of time in the comments too. So even just as a tip to those that may be freelancing or showing your knowledge, going and using the hashtag to look up live events, see what posts have been there, maybe commenting or sharing some advice, like those just being some great ways to put yourself out there. Alex?
Yeah, and the only thing, and I'm both good and bad at this at times, depending on what it is. But on social media, when you post something, know that there's going to be responses. And the best thing to do is respond to those responses, either liking them or to respond to them or reply to them or whatever it is. But, and I sometimes do that well, and I sometimes don't do it well, but I know that it's important to do that. It gives people positive reinforcement that you actually saw what they did.
Right. And Chris Fitchie, actually, great point, Chris. He says the like button is absolutely useless unless you follow it up with a reply of what you said or what you liked about it. So that takes it much further with you showing your thoughtfulness, especially if you are using LinkedIn to build relationship. A lot of folks, you're just spraying it out there. But if you're actually trying to build a relationship, because if you think about it, again, the long tail game of people getting an idea of who you are. So when you do actually reach out to someone that they kind of remember either your face. I've been to events when I went to Collision, someone we'd never spoken before apart from just LinkedIn communications, they saw me because of us going back and forth and commenting on posts. So it's definitely very helpful. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, inspired by my experiences during the past 7 months, I've been thinking more I'd want to look at using my media and technology skills in some form in the social and or human services field. Would there be groups where those fields connect?
Alex?
Yeah, they always connect. It's just a matter of figuring out how to connect them well. So definitely using media and technology skills definitely make a difference in those areas. It's just figuring out. The key is looking for something, as Sky would say, looking for the need, and then figuring out how you use the tools that you have to solve that need. It's not about what you want to do. It's what's needed to be solved, and you have to get yourself out of the way and have it be something that is what do I have that could help actually solve a problem there. And I think a lot of people have a hard time getting that what they want to do out of the way so that they can figure out what's needed.
Bill?
Yeah, this is all about human connection and communication, and these tools are all there to transfer information or ideas or useful concepts between individuals. And these things that we're doing, digital production, video, audio, all the rest of the things we talk about here at LinkedIn, and the networks, the computer networks that distribute them to people are all about that. And that is about as universal a set of skills as you can get. And I can't believe it's ever going to be out of vogue for somebody who can make a good piece of communication and send it out to a large audience won't be useful. As to social human services and the rest of that, they are no different than the wider market in that they need enhanced communication to get their ideas spread out. So whether you decide that what's really your passion is working for NGOs or corporations, even in some for-profit corporations, they have initiatives that help. They do charity work. They have initiatives inside the company. It may not be their primary thing, but I've worked with large companies that had charities attached to them, and it gets you in the door of a big company and lets you do work that is fulfilling personally while being on a substantial payroll. So lots of opportunities here.
Jesse.
A good place to start will be your local library, actually. They often have training technology classes for seniors. Also, maybe look into supporting immigrants and things like that are new to the U.S. that are in need of picking up some media and technology skill to expand their job prospects.
Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada, says, I have generally had an accept all incoming requests approach to LinkedIn. All was well until I was promoted to a manager position. Now it's constant requests from people wanting to make a sale. Any suggestions on connection management?
Alex.
So I would recommend, I was that way for a little while, but I would recommend against that. It actually throws the algorithm off pretty dramatically if you start responding, you accept everything. It also puts everybody at risk because a lot of people make decisions of, oh, I don't know that person, but they know 30 people that I know. Now that means that you could be connected to somebody who's just really trying to sell things, and they're taking advantage of people like you and I that were doing that, and building that up so that other people will say yes, and it's kind of a chain reaction. So you want to be careful of accepting it. I generally won't accept anything of a person that I don't know that says sales in it. Like sales or marketing. If you say that, unless you're a company that I know, I'm like, nope. And so I ignore all of those. I generally ignore ones that of people I don't know or know of their company. And then oftentimes someone says something of who they are, and then you hit yes, and I'm pretty rough. If you send me a sales thing after I friended you, I will just unfriend you. I'm just like, nope. And that's my communication to not do that.
And you make a good point of just overall LinkedIn etiquette of when you accept, if someone accepts your request, don't don't let selling be the first thing that you do, because you'll get that result right there. Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, for me, it was always, I got real tight about people I would accept requests from, and it came down to this. I am expecting to share with this person as many thoughts that are of a positive nature as I can. What I want in response is for them to do the same thing. So people who just wanted a one-way thing, in other words, they want to gather names to build their numbers and nothing else, I don't have any time for them. I want people who I can actually interact with in hopes that we will both grow out of the relationship. So I always limited from the very beginning the number of people I connected to on social media sites.
And John, I would check what you have enabled in your profile. If you have it as follow, like there's a way that you can just have it as follow. So then if someone so when they're attempting to send a request, it only gives the option to follow. And then that way, once they follow and then you take a look, then you're like, oh, okay, this is someone that I do want to connect with. So check that out, because that might be helpful for you in the future as well. Next question.
Next question comes from Dave Burke in Alexandria, Virginia. And Dave says, I've always limited my LinkedIn connections to people I've actually met. How would you decide who gets into your LinkedIn world? Right on the topic.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think part of what Alex just shared too is like, well, have you met them? Do you know them? Possibly. Oftentimes I find that when people I see the eyeballs on on my LinkedIn, it's like, oh, okay, like let's see. And just doing some of that discovery work to see if there is this someone that you would be able to just learn about? Do you want to learn more about them? Because the relationship goes both ways. Alex?
The ninjas at LinkedIn, I always know that someone's like a LinkedIn ninja is I get into a group meeting with them, and after the meeting, I immediately get a LinkedIn request. Like hey, just had a great meeting with you. And I do it now too. Someone will be talking and we have a good rapport back and forth in a meeting. The time to do that is when you're top of mind. like when you just had the meeting and you had a good interaction or whatever, like, oh, I think I want to stay connected to that person. And you reach out. I don't always do it, but I definitely noticed there's some folks, man, they're really good at that. Like within 5 minutes after the call closes, sometimes while you're still in the call, they sit there and they send you a LinkedIn request. And usually those people are pretty good at being appropriate about it. They just know that that's the time to do it.
Yeah. There are a lot of even mixers, or when you're in those networking events from a Zoom perspective, where that top of mind, like that being the key part to what Alex said, because then they'll, oh yeah, Alex, and keep it moving. Because any later than that 24, 48 hours, then you might not get accepted. Yeah. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle up next. How does commenting on a post that you have created trigger notifications to those who have interacted with that post?
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, good. I get to do a Mickey. I think it depends. It depends on how their notifications are set up to notify them. It doesn't actually have anything at all to do with you.
Correct. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Dave Burke in Alexandria, Virginia. What's your system for making and storing notes about your connections? How do you know the person, where you met, and so forth?
Alex.
I wish I had one. Like I just look at, how do I know that person? And usually it's because I have some connection or I don't, with them. Sometimes I can look back at messages because I use LinkedIn messages a lot. So I can look back at, like, if I had a conversation with those folks about what? Yeah.
And Bill?
I think this was how Salesforce built itself into the juggernaut that it is, was creating those systems for keeping notes about contacts. They used to call them contact management systems. And everybody that I ever knew in sales lived and died by their contact management system. So you just have to train yourself to do it.
The secret to Salesforce is it keeps all those notes with the company when you leave. That's the secret why companies love it.
And Jason?
I use notes in contacts. A little gotcha here, though. Be real careful. If you ever share a contact, those notes are also going to be included. So just fair warning.
Very, very good point. I just want to add an addendum to the LinkedIn. When you're creating an event and going live, I'll probably have to do a video and post it and share it into the group, because when you do the StreamYard, it should connect directly to the event. And StreamYard actually created a new event, which is like its own live. So I will come back and share that in the community so that you can actually see that in action. And it looks like we're at the top of the hour. So thank you so much to our producers for your questions, to our panel for your responses and sharing your insights on LinkedIn. This will not be the last session. We will dive deeper into it on how it works for branding and also how it works for B2B businesses. And to find out more about the schedule and what is happening for the rest of the week here on Office Hours, head over to officehours.global, and we're going to head into after hours. We'll see you soon.
Cool show, Liberty. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks to our production team. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Always making us look and sound amazing.
I could find a good realtor on LinkedIn. I don't think they've ever been aware of them.
Oh, don't let the realtors find out about it. That would be crazy.
Oh, it'd be nuts.
Bye, y'all.
I learned a lot.